In 1897, 3 Swedish explorers set out to reach the North Pole via hydrogen balloon. And like most attempts from the 17th century to about 80 years ago, it ended in death for the explorers. This is their story. And mine too, as I try to unravel my own obsession with their quest. Hi, I'm Kamari, and I've been traveling extensively throughout the Nordics for almost a decade. And I've had some pretty epic adventures along the way, like snowmobiling across Svalbard for almost 7 hours. We were searching for polar bears, and I was trying not to pee. Reindeer slaying in northern Norway, even dipping in the ocean in Finland in the middle of winter.
That's the coolest I've ever been in my life, ever.
I always joke that I'm a modern-day polar explorer, having been fascinated by the tales of all the giants before me, like Ronald Amundsen, Matthew Henson, Ernest Shackleton, and Salomon August Andrée. This is why, out of all of the Nordic countries, the Arctic specifically has a special place in my heart, especially Svalbard. It is a very significant location, being 600 miles south of the North Pole, that's allowed it to become a base for a lot of sea and air expeditions over the past 200 years. And one of the most famous and tragic happened right here, 1897, the expedition of Andrée. You had 3 Swedish explorers who set off on a hydrogen balloon, attempted to reach the North Pole, and after 3 days, unfortunately came crashing down in a winter wonderland. So they did survive originally, but 3 months later, they passed away. And unfortunately, to this day, nobody knows what happened. It's sort of like one of those great mysteries that's kind of in the lost archive files of the polar expeditions. It is a story that's captivated an entire nation over 100 years later, and everyday people like me. So the director of the North Pole Expedition Museum in Longyearbyen asked me, she's like, of all the polar explorers, why Andrée? There's like birds flying around me. Sure, our lives are separated by over 100 years and we come from 2 very different worlds, but the story kind of feels like mine. So I'm currently on a freight boat that's going close to the starting point of the Andrée Expedition, around 80 degrees north. And I have a lot of questions. I mean, I want to learn more about polar expeditions, like look at a historical timeline. I want to understand more of the significance that Svalbard's had in the race to the pole. But the question I'm looking to answer most is one that was asked of me. Why Andrée? All the polar explorers, of all the stories out there, why is the one that's connected to me the most? I'm also looking for polar bears. So if I see any, I'll make sure to show them to you. This is an adventure in Svalbard, an adventure to tell this story, an adventure to find my answer. It's just right over there. And that adventure, well, it starts right here. So it is day 1 of being on the boat. Origo. Not a whole lot to report today. Don't worry, this isn't a vlog, but we're going to do a little bit of setup for my 8-day trip on the vessel. Basically, we're just loaded on the boat, met everybody else in the team. So there's about 7 crew members, 5 Arctic guides, 12 other passengers. I should mention this was really a ski trip, and I'm not a skier. You would think after living in Austria for 5 years, I'd be a pro. That's a negative. However, I know the owner of the company Arctic Guides from my old days at Red Bull in Austria, so I got a very last-minute passage on the vessel. Now, everybody on boat except me were Swedish, which actually was really fitting considering Andrée and his crew were Swedish as well. So this made getting interviews about Andrée really easy. And also really easy to try Swedish food, which actually wasn't that bad. So the room I was staying in, on the bottom deck like all the others, was very well equipped. I think it's nice. We have 2 beds, basically it's for hairdryer and just all my production equipment. Got a little table here, which is nice, and I like it. Power outlet set up there for all my devices. Here's the radiator, which is way too hot. Kind of like a little mini closet area, which is nice. So my suitcases fit nicely in there. Got an actual full-on shower. And then we also have the toilet. Pretty cool setup. But yeah, better than what I expected, so I will take it. So here's the thing about adventuring in the Arctic. You're entirely dependent on the weather. So every morning after breakfast, which for some reason I never filmed because I guess I was too worried about stuffing my face and filming for you guys. Sorry about that. Andrés would let us know the plan. And well, my plan actually always differed from everybody else's. Head out to the glacier front and do other stuff that I don't really know. No, I'm snowshoeing across the way. Everybody else is skiing. I'm the odd duck. I'm like Andrea. He and I are very much alike. We are the odd ducks out. Too many people in the story with similar names. I met Andrée. But climate change and Baltic snow had other plans for us that day. And for the next few, in fact. While the team would ski or attempt to, the snow was simply too soft for me to snowshoe and film my script, as you'll soon see. So Martin became my personal Arctic guide and kept me company. And for the first couple of days, as we ventured along the west coast of Svalbard, inching towards 80 degrees north, a personal goal of mine, and the starting point of the expedition, which, by the way, I convinced Andrés to make for this story, Martin and I got up to our own tricks in the Zodiac. So some polar bear tracks are spotted further down the shore, that way. So we're going further down towards the glacier front, just to find the tracks. Maybe a polar bear or two. Apparently it's a mother and its cub. I would love to see it. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. They have spotted some bear tracks. So like they slept there last night, you think? Possibly.
Possibly.
Possibly. That's what we like to hear. Possibly slept right there. You can see mama bear, the baby one right below it. I don't know if you can see it. I'll cut to it so you can see it. It's pretty cool. I just kind of wish they would like pop up and be like, we're here. So we can get the video content. Not yet. Still 7 more days. We're going to keep searching for the polar bears. We found more polar bear tracks. They're on the move. Or they're in the water. One of the two. We didn't get so lucky, but we continued trying each time we went out. And I guess you have to wait and see if we found them. Nighttime was my time to continue working on my script, which we still hadn't filmed yet, finding new ways to keep myself entertained. You're the one that I ever needed. And even cooking. So here's the thing, I'm a vegetarian, so eating in the Nordics is always a thing. Now, I was strategic in making friends with the head chef, who also was the head chef on the Icebreaker Odin Antarctica. So that night, I helped make pizzas for everyone, and a very special spicy pizza for me. He taught me some pretty good lessons if you're, say, cooking on a boat in the Arctic.
You know, when you work in there on rolling, it's always important to always secure everything to meet when you use it.
Yes, those throw them down.
Yeah, and you get your leg or your foot or anything.
He might have saved my life.
Possibly.
Well, I just started, but I think it's looking good.
Yeah.
But the most important lesson he taught me,
Oh my God, we forgot something really important. You have to get those 2 glass of stock shots on yours.
And to get what?
Stop.
Oh, it's not.
2 glass.
I never moved so fast. But you didn't think I'd actually drink on camera, right? I am trying to keep it PG for the kids, but here's what I will say.
I like being sous chef.
Here we go.
I'm sous chef.
Tipsy sous chef.
Are you satisfied with your result?
Very satisfied. Look at those beauties.
But things eventually cleared up so we could finally reach land, and I could then finally answer my first question about the history of polar expeditions, since you might be tired of me vlogging. But this won't be the last that you hear from me. I feel like the Michelin Man. Anyway, so polar explorations actually started as early as 800 AD when Flóki Vilgardensen discovered Iceland. Some sources say he discovered it. Others say he was one of the first people there. Most importantly, he was the first person to intentionally sail to Iceland. And that matters for a reason, which you'll see in a second. Now, I'm a real cat in Seattle with my parents. I named him Flóki, and the one I carry on to is Good Luck, with the intent that it will hopefully give a passageway to Iceland. However, I'm not there yet still, so I think I need to come up with another plan to get to Iceland. But anyways, let's go on the boat, let's get to the island, and let's continue our history lesson.
Very hot here.
Climate change is real. Just saying. Okay, that's it. I'm not getting off the boat.
I was hoping for you to fall.
Let's not have me falling, please.
Step on your shoelaces and...
I know. Hopefully you don't see it in the shot that I just faked that entire thing. Too late. Already told you. Anyways, the crew went off to ski, and Martin and I, well, we went off to film and pee.
He's using the toilet. Kind of want to go too. This is the problem with being in the Arctic. It's the bathroom situation is always kind of a tough one for me. Though I did pee when I was in Svalbard last time. I did the 7-hour snowmobile trek across to the East Coast, and we went to this little like cave, and I like basically squatted in a corner and then I fell in the snow. It was fine. We connected, so maybe we need to pee again here so we can like reconnect again.
Which I did right after filming this segment. But don't worry, you both use hand sanitizer. I think.
Do you know what you're doing?
Nope.
Great.
Right?
This is weird. This is what... Okay. Okay, so for the next 200 years, well before Andrée, some of the discoveries in the Arctic were actually incidental.
In 1596, Dutch explorer William Barents was looking for an alternative route to the Far East, and he discovered Spitsbergen, Svalbard's largest island, and he named it after its very craggy peaks.
And other early explorers like Henry Hudson and James Cook, they actually set out to look for the Northwest Passage, which is a sea route that was believed to connect the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. However, it was never really their intent to actually look for the North Pole. That didn't come until 1773, almost 100 years before Andrée's expedition.
With Constantine Phipps, an officer in the British Royal Army.
But sadly, his ship's racehorse and carcass driven back by packed ice, which is still a problem today. Maybe why we're not able to actually get all the way to 80 degrees north.
Sea ice that have frozen over the winter, the surface of the ocean, and from storms or whatever, it gets broken into pieces, floats away, hits something, packed together.
But it's dangerous though, because a lot of the early expeditions had to turn around because of pack ice.
Yeah, you try to find a way through it, and the wind and the current all of a sudden decides that, no, we're going to move the pack ice this way instead, and all the gaps are closed, and you're sitting there for the winter.
So it's probably hard for the early explorers to be able to navigate it, because we have a freight boat, so in theory you could cut through some, but the early boats probably couldn't have.
Yeah, and that's why you have the lookout thing on top of the masts.
Mm-hmm.
So someone sits up there and try to see a way through the pack ice. See an opening over there, try that.
So something I've actually learned since coming up here is the different expeditions going up north in the early 19th century actually had different goals. And it wasn't just to look for the North Pole.
The big nations, I mean, Great Britain, France, Germany, were looking south instead, to the South Pole. The North Pole discovering was in fact in the background.
That's Håkan, and he is the museum director of Grenna Museum, which is a polar center largely dedicated to the Andrée Expedition. Now, he recently released the first biography around Andrée, so he's basically an expert on the guy. So, you'll be seeing a lot more of him. And what else were they hoping to discover? Maybe a safer walking path?
Are you stuck?
I wanted to go this way.
I did, but I thought we would go along the tracks. Oh, goodness. That's going to be me in a minute, guys.
A polar bear weighing 600 kilos
Yeah,
is better than us at this.
that's true.
That's weird.
Yeah. So we're still going this way. Okay, cool. Cool. Why don't we go to where the tracks are? Because I'm going to get stuck in that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we might die trying to film, guys. That might be happening. Anyways, the first reason was to continue to look for the Northwest Passage, of course, which actually was led by the British in the 1820s for about 50 or so years. One of the most famous ones you may already know.
British explorer and naval officer Sir John Franklin, he, his crew, and his 2 ships, the HMS Airbus and HMS Terror, all vanished without a trace.
About a decade after it disappeared, you had about 100 European ships that were sent out to look for the ship, but also find out what happened. It almost became one of the great mysteries in the history of polar expeditions. And the ships weren't discovered until 2014 and 2016, so 200 years later.
Point being, this became a second goal of Arctic expeditions.
Third or fourth reason, whatever we're counting, was, of course, actually to map out new territory, right? Obviously, they were putting the maps while I was sinking in snow. Whatever, you're literally half in the snow, too, right now. I'm not the only one. It's fine. It's fine.
It sounds obvious, but so much was still unknown about the polar regions. So part of these expeditions was to expand and document these new areas. Strindberg, who was part of Andrée's expedition, his role was specifically to do this.
Number 4, 5. Last reason that we're going to talk about is scientific data. And this is where Svalbard comes in. So for the past about 200 years, since 1827, you've actually had a lot of expeditions specifically coming to Svalbard and its archipelago to research. So they're looking at Arctic animals, looking at climate change, looking at glaciers, looking at oceanic currents. And really kind of that research has really established and kind of solidified Svalbard really being one of the key areas for Arctic research, which is one of the main industries in town.
And the last goal was to see reindeer. I'm kidding, but it was a goal for Martin and I.
Oh, look at them, the reindeer tracks.
They got built-in snowshoes, you know.
Built-in snowshoes.
In many places in the Arctic, the explorers, or those who came after the explorers, brought reindeer to have some sort of meat production on different islands around these parts. Turned out very profitable or beneficial to anyone. But the reindeer on Svalbard, they came here on their own accord at some point. So they have developed to their own subspecies of reindeer. To our knowledge, no one brought them here. And people never came here.
People never settled here, which is the other video I'm doing. Look at that, guys. Look at that. Free. That was like basically a free shout out for the video to watch it, which I'll link somewhere at some point. We're going to head that way. We're going to follow the reindeer tracks. Right? All right, let's carry on.
Can't catch them, we're gonna starve.
Okay, well, we're not quite there. No, actually, I'm going to go the, was it the Greely? The Greely. He just gave me this look. I'm kidding. But that was a thing. 25 people went out. 7 came back. Apparently there was starvation, a whole lot of things going on.
So if you're ever gonna eat meat, it's gonna be human flesh. That's what you say?
Yeah, I'm just going to go really extreme, guys. This is what happens in the Arctic. You go a little crazy. I'd rather say the polar bears. That's really what's happening. And I love reindeers, so I don't like people. Easy answer. All right, we got to carry on. Anyways, but the race for the poles actually didn't start until the late 19th century. And that's really where it almost became like an international sporting game. You had private organizations, you also had national governments that were essentially funding these trips. And really the intent or the hope was who would discover the poles, but more specifically, who would reach the further north. And for about 70 years, it was like a ping pong game. It also gave an opportunity for them to essentially I would say expand their status. I think it's a little bit silly to chase a title. However, it's slightly ironic because part of my goal in this trip, well, we have a lot of goals in this trip, but actually is to reach 80 degrees north. I can't really fault them for chasing a title because I'm also doing it too, so it can be posted on my status.
This ping-ponging of furthest north titles and attempts to reach the North Pole, well, this was largely between the Americans, the Germans, the British, and of course, the Norwegians, all during the 1800s. I'll be honest, it's a bit of a mind maze, but the one thing I do want to point out is the first furthest north title was set right here in Svalbard in 1827 by William Edward Parry.
So he took his boat Helika, hope I'm saying that right, to Spitsbergen, the biggest island here. The sort of price tag was 1,000 pounds if you can get to 83 degrees north. Unfortunately, he ran into pack ice like a lot of these early explorers. He just set the very first furthest north record at, drumroll, 82.45.
And we were setting the record for most selfies in the Arctic.
It's the double filming. We're doing a photo in the Arctic. The question is, who actually discovered the North Pole? Well, it's not a clear answer, so I think we probably should head back to the boat. We'll explain there.
And because I didn't want to get eaten by a polar bear.
The normal polar bear is only curious. It doesn't know whether you're food or not, or whether you're dangerous or not.
Okay.
But if he's considering you for lunch,
Yeah.
and you start screaming in a high-pitched voice and running away from him, then he thinks, okay,
There's
that
lunch.
person knows it's lunch.
I can't run in these things. We can't run in these. So, I think we're going to be kind of mealtime if we see one. Basically, we're debating because he needs to check on the Zodiac. I want to stay in film. However, that thing, polar bears, you're not supposed to be. I think I should go back with you part of the way. I'll go with her. Though I did actually just learn, polar bears can swim up to 600 kilometers. Because I was thinking, because Spitsbergen, the Maine, is back there. And I was thinking, oh, there's no polar bears on this island. And he's like, no, they can swim here. So, I really want a close encounter. But also, I'm probably going to pee my pants and be terrified. So, maybe I backtrack on the close encounters desire that I said at the beginning of it. I want a very socially distanced encounter.
But I didn't plan to go train how to protect myself, so maybe being a polar safety guide is in the cards for the future.
That he uses for polar bear protection.
It's very big.
Very big, very efficient.
I guess we like efficient. I'm shooting my first gun. Very extreme. I'm doing it with the polar team. Am I going? Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I'm looking for putting the red dot. And
I have a thing about talking to myself, clearly.
I'm going. Here I go. That hurt my shoulder. It really pulls back. You didn't tell me that. It hurts. Oh, wow. That's exciting, guys. Just saved my own life.
So maybe I'm a little dramatic, but I'm prepared now, and that's what matters. And it's worth noting that shooting a polar bear is always your last resort. Anyways, back on the boat into our story about who discovered the North Pole. American explorers Peary and Cook were former friends and shipmates. They crossed paths for many years, seemingly getting along, but started to drift after the first trip to Nunavut, or better known as Greenland, and they became each other's greatest competition to reach North Pole first. Between 1907 and 1908, they embarked on missions up north. Unbeknownst to each other, they were making a voyage. And en route back to America, they learned of each other's expeditions, and it was a race to get the news out first. On September 1st, the Washington Times first announced that Cook reaches the North Pole, and a week later, headlines from The Sun and the New York Times claims that Peary did. So, to make a very long story short, after they came back, there was a formal review of all the materials, or we'll say lack thereof. The title was actually given to Peary. So the Naval Affairs Subcommittee of the United States House of Representatives, that's a mouthful, they actually granted the title of Peary Discovered the North Pole in a vote 4-3. However, the minority went on record saying they had deeply rooted doubts about his claim. So let's fast forward to 1988. The National Geographic Society, which also gave $1,000 contribution towards Peary's original mission, reviewed his materials again and said he likely missed the mark. And ever since, explorers have noted how accurate some of the details were in Cook's original documentations. So in the end, nobody really won. So it begs the question, is there a first undisputed claim to the North Pole? Norwegian explorer Ronald Amundsen was planning his own expedition to the North Pole when he actually changed his mind to conquer the South Pole instead, telling no one, not even his crew, until leaving the last port of call, Madeira. So he became a national hero in Norway when he was first discovered the South Pole on December 14th, 1911. And he later went on to become the first person to reach the North Pole, undisputed, via airship, the Norge. So technically, he's the first person to reach the North and the South Pole. And he ended up going missing when he went on a rescue mission to save another ship. So this guy's pretty cool. I think we're gonna do a video about him pretty soon. Ever since, there's been 247 completed and successful attempts to the North Pole, post-Peary and Cook-ish, according to National Geographic as of 2016. But it does make you wonder, of all the voyages that went out, how many countless lives were lost? And why did these men actually join these missions knowing that they likely weren't gonna come home? When I was in Longyearbyen, I spoke with the director of the North Pole Expedition Museum, and she mentioned working in a coal mine or factory was your main other option for work, but it wasn't risk-free. It didn't have the health and safety regulations that exist in place today, so you risked your life whichever path you took. So why not take a shot at glory? It's impossible to know exactly how many attempts failed, but we can assume a lot, and for a variety of reasons. The ships back then weren't built to crush the packed ice, and many were sunk because the ice pushed them down. Oftentimes they would abandon their ships in this state, taking their chances on land, but then would only die from malnutrition and a lack of vitamins called scurry. They also died from the extreme cold, where a frostbite leads to infection, amputation, and well, game over. What didn't help was poor planning and bad equipment, or perhaps untested plans. And this is where we meet Andrée, and where I meet the hot tub. I feel like a little bit guilty that I'm on a hot tub in the Arctic, because I'm not sure that early explorers would have done this. However, if they had the option, they might have. So, because it's here, I think I'm just going to sit back, relax, and enjoy the view a little bit. And hopefully you will too. Oh, by the way, it's 56 minutes. I'm still available for that sponsorship if you're interested. I've just tried to get sponsored by this brand for the past 8 years or so. Maybe they'll finally notice me now. Andrée's expedition was one of the great tragedies in the quest for the North Pole. 3 men left Svalbard in a hydrogen balloon, only to crash land a few days later on ice a few hundred miles south of the North Pole. Over 30 years later, their bodies were discovered, with enough food and ammunition to get them through the winter. So where did it go wrong? Well, we have to start from the beginning to tell their story, using their words and those that knew them best. Salomon August Andrée was born in Grenna, a small town in Sweden, in 1854 to Klaus and Jakobina. He was very close with his mother, and it's been rumored he was her favorite child. He was said to have a strong will, lively imagination, and an uncommon energy. At the age of 15, he moved to Stockholm to study at what is now KTH, Royal Institute of Technology. So he was actually a trained engineer who at the age of 22 went to the Centennial Explosion in America. And actually en route there, he read a book called The Laws of Wind by C.F.E. Björling.
Björling.
That was pretty close, right, guys? I think it was pretty close. Anyways, this entire book inspired his concept of flying over the Atlantic. But while there, he also visited a well-known aeronautic named John Weiss, who taught him how to build a balloon, as well as many other principles of aeronautic art. Because I have such a connection to him and want to understand why, I guess it's time to meet me too. I'm Kamari, and I was technically born in America, in a small town in Washington State. I was actually raised between the US, Germany, and UK, due to a European mother and military father. I actually was trained in communications at the University of Miami, and also at the age of 22, I came here. Quite literally, right that building, the Sony building, because an internship at Columbia Records. I'll say one way or another, the internship and everything afterwards actually inspired my dream to tell my own stories. 14 years before the expedition, he was a researcher in the first International Polar Year. He was charged with leading the aeroelectrical observations at a station in none other than Svalbard. 12 years before, he was a chief engineer at the Royal Patent Office and established the Society of Swedish Innovators. And 3 years before, while his interest in balloons became tangible, he actually wrote his first one at 38, and it took him 3 years to save up to buy his first one called Svea. And on this balloon, he traveled about 1,500 kilometers and spent about 40 hours aloft. During this window is when he actually started to practice and sort of fine-tune his drag and steer rope mechanism, which is what his plan was to use to go to the North Pole. Though this method has actually been rejected by modern balloonists.
Today, when they fly a hydrogen balloon and you want to land, then you pull out this drag rope.
But what about for flying and navigation?
Have a drag rope when flying. That was a new invention. I think it was quite a clumsy operation, if I would say so.
That's Håkan. He's a balloonist, and Strindberg, another member of the expedition, was the cousin of his grandfather. So 16 years ago, well before I started this show, my career in content started right here behind the camera in Nickelodeon. So 3 years ago, I actually concepted out this entire show, but did nothing with it. And I'll explain why later on. And 1 year before, my interest in filmmaking, well, it finally became tangible too. But we'll save that story for the season finale. I too am taking a plunge making my dreams happen a little bit later in life, though I feel like 30s is the new 20s. So Andrée was 38 when he wrote his first balloon. I will be 37 by the time this actually is published, though I hope it doesn't take 3 years for this channel to be successful if that's what's in its cards. So an important moment to remind you to like, comment, and share this video so my little channel can grow, please. Please and thank you. You can't really see it, but there's a seal over there. He's basically the Lone Ranger. Somewhere over here. You know, it's kind of a Lone Ranger. Also like Andrée, I know. So he was actually quite different than the polar explorers. So I don't know the motives for everybody that attempted a trek up north, but I do know for many of them, they wanted to be the first to reach it there. However, Andrée, different goals. So he really wanted to prove that you could fly a balloon over the Atlantic. And he was smart in the fact that he used kind of this window of time, the polar years, and really capitalized on marketing his plan to go to the North Pole.
They actually wanted to cross the Atlantic Ocean. But who would finance that trip? No one. Boring. And they knew that if I turn my aim on the north instead, there I'd have the money.
Yet Sweden wasn't in the best economical state at the time.
We knew thousands and thousands were leaving Sweden because of economic disaster, bad harvesting, and religious beliefs, etc. So we were actually leaving Sweden for Americans and start a better life. And in those years then, in the same circumstances, Andrée managed to finance an expedition going to distant area, somewhere else.
Actually, it was smart of Andrée to go this route because up until this point in the timeline, Sweden hadn't made any other attempts to go to the North Pole. They were lagging behind in their Arctic explorations. No coughing on camera, I'm shooting a video.
Terribly sorry. What's up again?
Lies. Because Sweden basically was lagging behind in Arctic explorations compared to their northerly friends, Norway.
I think they took a gamble, but I think it was a little bit like the Norwegians were so far with their shipping, and the Swedes wanted to do something too.
That's Gunnar, and he's one of the Swedish passengers on the ship with us.
I think there is an undefined competition, and important for Sweden's science to be the first one up there, in fact.
So Andrée was a very persuasive speaker and gifted with words, and he was able to raise his entire funds that he needed, which was around 130,000 Swedish kroner. Yeah, again, what he said. It was equivalent to about $1 million in USD in current times. And he got it from King Oscar II and Alfred Nobel, who is the creator of the Nobel Peace Prize. All these parties were very happy to contribute because, again, they really wanted Sweden to be the country that found the North Pole.
It's amazing to realize that Andrée financed these expeditions in, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks. He had all the money, all the amount to do this expedition.
And he logged in one very important approval.
Adolf Erik Nordenskiöld, a grand polar explorer of Sweden in late 19th century. And he was the first one to give thumb up. Go ahead. Had he not got that support, there would be no expedition, I'm sure.
His friends pegged that his ambition would take him far, and it was this ambition and interest in social issues, such as advocating for women's rights, that made him well known in the country. So raising funds and all the support he received isn't too surprising. And since this was such new technology, there was little question if his concept and argument of a hydrogen balloon flying to and over the North Pole was doable, other than newspapers making predictions. One Austrian newspaper wrote, "This Mr. Andrée, who wishes to go to the North Pole and back by means of an air balloon, he simply is a fool or a swindler."
The big difference, in fact, that he was no explorer, in my view. He was an engineer, and he wanted to try to find out if it's possible to fly a balloon on huge, long distances. So he's not an explorer. He just wants to try a new technique.
But no, this is where things differ between Andrée and I as well. He does something very unique. I'm not as much, but I would say I've worked with content creators for at least 7, 8, 9 years now. I'm definitely dating myself. I've already told you my age, so it's fine. But I have worked with content creators, but in content production my entire career. So I do have a lot of experience in this space to hopefully make this successful. And similar to Andrée wanting to prove you could fly a balloon over the North Pole, it's really important in the work that I do to prove there is more to the Nordics than glaciers and wildlife, by showing the true everyday life of the people. One item that was important to Andrée as he was building the expedition was branding, and as a marketer, I really dig it.
It was expressed the agreement that all parts should be branded. I think that is quite odd in a way, I must say.
So you haven't seen that for other expeditions?
No. But we have seen from the expeditions that their plates, the porcelain was with the brands, from the ship's name, etc. But this is every part is almost branded with a name.
But don't worry, I'll wait a few years before I launch my own merch line, before you ask. In 1896, Andrée set out with physicist Nils Strindberg. He was a 23-year-old teaching assistant at Stockholm University. After he was chosen, he spent 6 months in Paris pursuing aeronautic studies and made 6 balloon ascents.
You can find a letter saying, well, I'm here in Paris now trying to learn to fly balloon. In the same time, August writes to someone and says, I met my nephew here, Nils, and he's going to try to fly to the North Pole in a balloon. He's a lunatic.
His role was navigation and aerial photography to document the region. The camera they took was built for the mission and based on his own designs.
Nils' camera was genius because they had first roll film. It was also constructed so that you could lean the camera in a certain angle in order to tilt the picture right. And that way, he wanted to make a map where they were flying. As a matter of fact, a real predecessor to the Hasselblad. You can see these round things on the front of the camera where they put out, this is the day, this is the date, the time. It's excellent. We wouldn't have been talking to each other without the camera. Because that was a picture that showed the world what happened.
And then 46-year-old doctor of meteorology, Nils Ekholm, who was considered to be one of Europe's top meteorologists. With a large send-off, they set out on June 7th from Gothenburg, Sweden, with a crew of 35 men. When they arrived on Danes Island, they actually built a 5-story home that they used to protect the balloon. And the thought was once the weather was good, they would be able to rip the front of the house and the balloon would be released and they would be on their merry way to the North Pole. The balloon house was 30 meters both in height and diameter and made of spruce. We have started sealing the balloon, and by midsummer, we will be ready to inflate it. Most probably will launch at the beginning of July. I am eagerly waiting for that moment, and I'm sure that all will have a happy ending. Oh, what it will be wonderful to return back. My little Anna, who surely is a little unhappy. Oh, she would be happy then. Anna was Strindberg's fiancée. So their course was actually to fly over the North Pole with the balloon and drop a buoy, and they were going to continue on to Alaska or the Canadian Siberia. However, the weather had another plan. So they waited a few weeks, never got the favorable wind, so they had to pack up and go back to Sweden to provide another gear and wait. During this time, Ekholm resigned, having doubts in the balloon's ability to hold hydrogen. So Andrée's original calculations was they could fly this balloon and it could stay in the air for 900 days. He then went down to 30 during this window, saying he could cross the Arctic in 7. However, no balloon has ever stayed in air more than 1 day at this point in history.
Ekholm was supposed to join them in 96. He was supposed to be one of Europe's most skilled meteorologists. And his calculation was that the Arctic climate, the weather, speed, etc., it was proper for balloon flight. While other meteorologists in Europe said it's impossible. And they were talking about same climates. And maybe Ekholm wanted to make it good because he wanted to see these expeditions fulfilled. In 96 anyway.
Nils is writing about it in his letter saying, he's a kind of traitor, he won't fly with us.
Yet, he tried to take a stand upon his return.
He had the courage to express his feelings about this expedition. And he wrote letters to his scientific friends, almost pledged them to try to stop Andrée. He must change his mind, get a new bigger balloon. Then it might work, but not with this balloon. It's leaking too much hydrogen. It's impossible.
It was just becoming too risky, and the mission had gone too far, or perhaps Andrée was too far along.
Too much personal prestige and honor into it. He couldn't go back. And that's also something that Fridtjof Nansen, the Norwegian explorer, says after meeting Andrée in Tromso, 1896.
And what about Strindberg? Through writing an essay for college, Håkan's daughter Cecilia and Håkan himself dug into the family history and connected with other relatives to discover
6 thick volumes of all letters was written between Nils' father, Håkan.
And they were able to piece together the answer.
Although Nils was advised not to go to the expedition by his professor, Nils saw this as a chance to make a very fast career.
It was also a chance for him to make money, according to letters, and keep his word to Andrée. So they continued on, and Andrée found somebody to replace Ekholm, Knut Fraenkel, a 27-year-old who claimed to be a civil engineer. However, on his resume, he didn't actually have any professional experience. So his job was to do meteorological observations. While Fraenkel is often portrayed as the strong man, it was often the other two who physically persevered on the trip.
They made a movie about Strindberg, portrayed as a weak man. He was a weakling. Fraenkel was a strong man. He was like an ox. Andrée was a clever man. But as a matter of fact, every Sunday, he took the skis about 30 kilometers to reach his end. He was not a weak man. On the contrary, he was a strong man.
So when they turned back home to Sweden, they might have been a bit worried. What will the crowd say to them? Are they cowards, etc.? But it was only 2-3 days. He was funded again for a new attempt. Somewhere around 70,000.
So half of what they received from their first attempt. In 1897, they headed back to Spitsbergen with a slightly modified balloon, which was made in Paris by famous balloon manufacturer Henry Lachaume.
Alfred Nobel has promised, I pay for a new balloon, but Andrée, you will enlarge the balloon instead. Added just a section in the middle.
The balloon was made out of Chinese silk and consisted of 3,360 silk squares. And it had about 8.5 million miles worth of seams. What this meant is you now had over 8 million holes that was leaking hydrogen.
Nils estimated there was a certain amount of paint they had to order in order to seal the balloon. Then they found out that Andrée didn't order so much paint as needed.
And unfortunately, they didn't have enough time to actually fix all this with varnish before they took off. There's also one other important feature of the balloon. It was made to be waterproof and resistant from frost and snow settling on it.
Beds inside here.
There's 2 what, sir?
Beds.
There's 2 beds.
Yeah, sleep on here, yeah.
Okay.
So they were supposed to sleep there, 2 of them, while the third one was on guard, handle balloon, yeah. And then we have to imagine a balloon further up there.
Yeah.
And you see there's the rope ladder.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There they had their equipments too. There were walls of textiles
Okay.
with pockets,
Yeah.
so they could store a lot of equipment up there.
And then where'd they keep the sleighs? Because those were quite large.
Small parts. You stick it together when you land. It's the same with the boats.
Okay.
Numbers on them. So the balloon was just in a bag maybe, like that. So when landing, you assemble the boat. You did the same way with the sledges.
They produced the hydrogen on Danes Island. This was led by engineer Axel Stake with 41 tons of sulfuric acid and 14 tons of iron and steel lath dust shavings. Him and the team actually made several provisions to be prepared in case they had to leave the balloon at any point during the expedition. However, there's a question if they were the right preparations, and a bigger question of, were they really prepared at all for what they were about to encounter? But even if we are obligated to leave the balloon and proceed over the ice, we should not consider ourselves lost. We have sledges and provision for 4 months, guns and ammunition. Hence, we are just as well equipped as any other expedition as far as that is concerned. I would not object to such a trip. And during a presentation of his plans at the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences in 1896, he stated the following: "The journey was not meant to be equipped to deprive it of its character of a balloon expedition, and thus these provisions were comparable to lifeboats and buoys on board a ship. So, back to the relation to me. So, for me, actually, the show was meant to be more of a traditional explainer, where I would be sitting at home using existing footage and also complementing that with stock footage to tell these stories. And it's just sort of been a series of events the past few weeks that have actually caused us to go back on the road, which I've been very excited about, but it's certainly probably the biggest investment that I've made towards my career to date. And to be honest with you, that switch only came a few weeks ago. And we'll discuss what those moments were in the season finale. I haven't been as prepared as I would have liked to have been, knowing what this show is going to entail. So as I look at what Andrée and the crew did or didn't do, certainly a really strong, we'll call slightly blinded internal optimism towards chasing their dream. And that I can really relate to going into the making of this show. So they wore woolen suits instead of furs, and they carried champagne across almost 3 months on ice. They bought 3 sledges with them, but after actually testing them, they realized that the runners were faulty, and they never fixed them before they took off. Also had 36 homing pigeons, where they actually had Andrée tattooed under the undercarriage of the pigeon. These birds would carry messages back to Aftonbladet.
Yes, you're trying to say Aftonbladet.
Yeah, exactly. That newspaper gave them 36 pigeons. This would carry messages back to the newspaper. And they also were able to add personal messages that had to be wrote in stenography. However, the pigeons were never trained on how to fly the newspaper headquarters in Stockholm.
Writing letters to the most important producers of geographical instruments. They had the top of the line of all things on this expedition. So it was very well planned in a theoretical way. Extremely well planned. But maybe then they should have tried to fly a balloon in this area once before, maybe.
And that's the thing, probably the most important thing. They never did a test run.
I think they were quite 3 strange guys going away up in the air with their ties and elegant suits, etc., champagne, etc. But in a way, they're coming from the Swedish middle class, the Swedish bourgeoisie. And they're supposed to live almost in the same way, but in a gondola, flying over the Arctic. And when landing, they're supposed to meet some representative from the Tsar or the President of the United States. And then they're supposed to dress properly, in a way. Few expeditions in those years had learned from the Inuits how to really prepare for living in these circumstances, etc. It was just, let's say, beginning of the 20th century when Roald Amundsen and maybe Peary, in a way, translated these ways and how to act in the polar region. Andrée and his friends are a bit odd, maybe, due to this.
I'm really happy you brought this up because Inuit being an important role and one of the most important in polar expeditions is a story I want to tell in a later season. After 43 days of waiting and preparations made, it was finally time to make their second attempt. On July 11th, 1897, perfect weather arrived and they set off.
The witnesses from the start, actually, it's obviously that Stringberg is very eager to get away because he realizes it's blowing the right direction and he wants to go immediately. But Andrée is more doubtful, in fact, so he asks his friend, "What do you really believe about this? Should we go?" He managed to convince Andrée okay, let's go.
I hope that you have sealed the balloon thoroughly so that we'll fly a long time and get over to mainland Canada, and that you must not spend the winter in the Arctic, as it would be a cruel ordeal for all your friends waiting for you to return. But nobody knows your fate, and we must prepare us with patience and hope. Almost immediately after takeoff, they saw a seal. I'm kidding, they didn't, but we're seeing a seal over here, so I just wanted to point that out. But after takeoff, they actually lost 2/3 of the drag rope almost immediately. It basically twisted off. The balloon was now a lot lighter, 1,625 pounds lighter to be specific. And it was a combination of the rope weight as well as some sandbag weight. So they ended up rising really, really high in the sky. The crew on the ground actually thought that they would land that hydrogen balloon, but they chose not to. And the last thing they heard them say was, "What the devil was that?" But they carried on and dropped 2 of the smaller buoys, number 4 and 7, found a few years later that included brief updates of location and movements to date. And one even stated the weather was magnificent. They were planning to fly at about 500 feet, but unfortunately, because they lost all the weight, they went up to 2,300 feet.
Also estimated how much would the balloon leak, and I think they were thinking about 40 kilos a day, but it was over 60 kilos a day. And that was because it wasn't sealed enough.
They were then met with unexpected fog and hoarfrost that weighed the balloon down. Remember, the preparation for the balloon, the cap and the netting, was for snow and rain, not for ice. At one point, they were hitting the surface of the ground every 2 minutes. They kept dropping weight out of the balloon, even actually the buoy that was going to announce their arrival at the North Pole, but unfortunately, nothing worked.
Symbolic sadness in a way, because it's very far away from the North Pole. So one can wonder, did they give up already now, on the second day? Who knows?
Yet, they enjoyed a nice meal, which was cooked by lowering the cooking stove from the car, and Stringberg wrote in his journal that it was a good and invigorating meal. So after 65 hours and 33 minutes in the air, the Örnen, or the English, the eagle, set down 82 degrees 56 minutes, which was about 300 miles from where they started, and about a third of the way to the North Pole. So unfortunately, with where they landed, they failed to create a new latitudinal record.
Hadn't there been in a fog, if there would be clear weather, what had happened then they could have fly quiet control. I think then they would have stayed along.
Is it not a little strange to be floating here above the polar sea, to be the first to have floated here in a balloon? How soon, I wonder, shall we have successors? Shall we be thought mad, or will our example be followed? I cannot deny that all three of us are dominated by a feeling of pride. We think we can face death well, having done what we have done. This was Andrée's reflections while Sternberg and Fraenkel were sleeping on the second day of their expedition in his journal. In fact, they all kept records. Andrée, 2 diaries, kept general observations about the expedition and its course. Fraenkel noted meteorological observations, while Strindberg, he kept astronomical observations, and he wrote letters to his fiancée in shorthand. So all three did survive the crash, and the next 3 months were 3 long months on the ice. What we know from the diaries is they were planning to head southeast to Franz Josef Land, which is an archipelago in Russia. They chose it because provisions were laid there by their team, and it's where Fredrik Nansen wintered the year before when returning back to Norway on the Fram, so they knew it could support human life. We are now moving onwards so slowly that perhaps we shall not reach Cape Flora this winter, but like Nansen, we'll have to spend the winter in our cellar. Each of their sleighs weighed about 440 pounds, and they moved them one by one, which actually is a really inefficient way to move sleighs. And they would do this over the course of several weeks, which actually made their journey longer. Over time, they did drop more and more weight with each sleigh, but this movement, coupling with not wearing the correct clothing, specifically having the right shoes, it made their journey unnecessarily harder. My beautiful darling, we have just stopped for the day after pulling and dragging our sleds for 10 hours. I am really rather tired, but must exchange a few words with my beloved. First and foremost, I must congratulate you, for this is the day of your birthday. Oh, how I wish I could let you know that I am in the best of health, and that you need not worry about us. We shall make it home in the end. You'll see. Now, during this time, Fraenkel started to experience snow-blindedness. They even preserved eyes from seagulls that they shot to examine this. I guess Smart wasn't kidding about it. And Strindberg made the first of many falls into the water, first his sledge, and at times himself too. I expect that my sack, which was on the sledge, is wet inside, and it is there that I have all of your letters and your portrait. Yes, they will be my dearest treasure during the winter. But in a few weeks, they realized they wouldn't make it there for winter. They pivoted, and they headed to the depot at 7 Islands instead. The same place that Konstantin Phipps and his team had to turn around 100 years ago. Now, their usual rules of the campsite were as follows. Strindberg will cook, Fraenkel would take meteorological notes and do housekeeping, while Andrée would prepare the march for the day and scout the area, which he commented often was tiring. On a good day, they traveled about 3 miles, and occasionally they would go up to 5 if they were using their boat. They ate sandwiches, coffee and biscuits, polar bear, which gave them fresh food for several days or several weeks depending on its size, and they even had a pleasant view at night. Magnificent Venetian landscape with canals between lofty hummock edges on both sides. Water square with ice fountains and stairs down to the canals. Divine. And on a bad day, they maybe progressed just 1 mile. They were on ice that gave way, so not only would they fall into water, but also their sleds as well. Again, they're not wearing proper clothing, so their clothing never really dried out almost the entire 3 months that they were living on the ice. They also would have diarrhea and other digestive problems, which they used morphine and opium to cure. This probably was from having a very eclectic menu, from having algae soup, from eating rare polar meat, which isn't great for you because it has...
Trichenes or whatever.
Yeah. It's bacteria, which isn't good for you to have. And also blood pancakes, which was made from bear blood, oak flour, and butter, which they actually commented quite often how much they enjoyed it. The polar bear ham, several days old, tasted heavenly. Raw brain is also very good, and the bear meat can easily be eaten uncooked. And they also used the polar bear skin, specifically from the forelegs, to mend their one sleeping sack they all shared. And it took them many tries to catch their first seal, but I have a feeling they'd have a pretty easy time catching this guy. What are you saying to it?
That you should think about what it's eating.
Are you calling him a little fat?
Heart problems, eventually. Gets his belly button now.
We can see its belly button and the man belly button. Oh my god, he is like, just can't handle life. He's like fat and lethargic and really happy, which is basically me and an animal. I think I should just come back on life as a seal. Bye. See you again soon. In late August and early September, they were all fighting sickness and body ailments. Franklin's foot was so bad he couldn't pull a sledge anymore. Food was rationed, they were tired, their sledges needed continuous mends, Strindberg continued to fall in the water, and the ice drift and wind pushed them further off course. Of their 140-mile journey, they'd only traveled 14 in about 6 to 7 weeks.
And the main reason for this expedition to fail was you didn't know about the theology, you didn't know about the jet streams and so on, nor did they know about the ice floating. Whenever they turned direction, the ice goes in the other direction. It was doomed.
Andrée's first comment after 2 weeks of silence was this: "Since I last wrote in my diary, much has changed." He later goes on to say the following in reflection about the past few days. "When we finally realized the necessity of facing the inevitable to winter on the ice, our position is not particularly good." Closer to the starting point, I'm very excited. I thought about him a lot today. Just thinking about like how high they were, and then, you know, what the view must have been like, because it's stunning, like in the air for 3 days. I couldn't imagine being a hot air balloon for 3 days. And then 3 months on a white plane and not even prepared either. And I was just thinking about that, right? Like, I mean, I always joke about 66 North. I obviously love them trying to get sponsored, but realistically, the clothing is really good. I mean, I'm sitting outside, I'm in the Arctic, I'm wearing this, I'm actually okay. How important it is to have the right gear when you're in this weather. So just thinking that they weren't in the right gear, they didn't have the right shoes, and it's like, they were literally stranded for 3 months. How you, like, psychologically work through that and physically work through that. I just thought about that a lot today, what that must have been like. I'm so surprised that you could live on one of these, but I mean, that's what they did. That's what they had to do. We're not getting off, right? You literally can't die because I don't know how to get back. Oh. So we just parked in Ice Floe. Martin got off. Am I really gonna be okay if I go up there?
If they hadn't gone to Vitön, they would never have been found, and we would never have known what happened to them.
Well,
we wouldn't be here today.
I mean, okay, well, we probably still be here. We still may not know what happened because all we really have is just a theory. I got on the Ice Floe. I'm risking my life to make this video, guys. I hope you appreciate this story. Anyway, so on September 17th is when spotted White Island, which they named New Iceland. This is the first time they've seen land since July 11th. The next day, they celebrate King Oscar II's 25 years on the throne with a grand meal, including seal steak, wine, and biscuits, and a speech by Andrée. Our ice floe is diminishing at a worrying rate in the vicinity of our shelter. This journal entry is from Andrée 10 days before their final one.
And now it was about, I think, 2 weeks later, their Ice Floe broke in half.
Our belongings were scattered among several blocks, and these were driving here and there, so we had to hurry. With such comrades, one should be able to manage under, I may say, any circumstances.
They got there on October 5th. They were there for about 3 days, or at least that's when their journal entry stopped. So we assume they actually passed away around October 8th. So the final 4 pages of their journal are really difficult to read. But what we are able to understand, and they indicated, is they spotted a polar bear out at the sea, and they were attempting to build a hut.
We collect whale bones and driftwood at times. That lets us move around a little bit whenever the weather permits. This was the last entry from Andrée's journal, and it's an interpretation by Helgensen. It implied nobody was sick or weakened. As he neared his own end, I neared mine. After 7 days, we finally reached the starting point of the expedition.
Danes Island is there. And that is the actual starting where the expedition took off over 120 years ago. They were basically waiting for 3 weeks on the second attempt to make it up into the sky. They were waiting for southerly winds. Kind of like me, I've been waiting to get to the starting point, thinking that somehow an answer would reveal itself about why I'm obsessed with the story, why it's so connected to Andrée. Feeling a little bit emotional, I would say, too, just because it feels like I've been chasing the story, chasing this person for so long, and it's gonna, in some ways, have a culmination, right? This is gonna signify something. Even though I don't know if it's the end of the journey. You know, there's an author who I really like, who actually kind of also inspired my own little small chase.
Pia Uzma. She's a Swedish author, doctor, and illustrator. After reading Andrée's story, she began a chase for the truth.
So many theories around how they could have possibly died, but none of them, I would say, has been the clear, this is what happened, right? There's so many different periods where other ones were their front runner.
In her own way, she spent 15 years looking for answers and developed her own working theory of how they all passed away.
A former colleague was part of that expedition, and he thought it was a very feasible theory.
You know, she had her own, love story here, and it kind of feels like I'm having my own one too. It's exciting to kind of have, I guess, a full circle moment and, relate to somebody else who also is so fascinated by the story.
I think in his mind, he was going to be successful.
He believed in a dream.
I believe in a dream, absolutely. When you have dreams, you got to go after them. I believe that's
exactly.
You should, yeah.
So can you fault him for doing this crazy dream?
No. He did what he wanted to do, and he did it. And did he drag the other ones to death? They had the right to say no, and they said yes. So, and I believe, when you go after it, go after it.
And that's exactly what he did.
Everybody knew I was here, on this journey, want to tell this story and, get answers. And I, been chatting with them, all week. And anyway, so this was the big moment for me, coming here. And most of them actually come out and join me. And because they were really curious too. Not about me, maybe, but they were curious to kind of see the starting spot because they too are familiar with the Andrée Expedition, but, wanted to see it for themselves. And so it was really sort of almost profound because we all were just really sitting here, standing, and just quiet and just kind of taking in the moment of realizing that this was the place of this historic moment for Sweden's big attempt to, in the race to the poles. And even though it was unsuccessful, still honoring and respecting the fact that people dedicated their lives to this and lost them in this quest. And it's still powerful and it's still worthy of having a moment. So it was almost like a very long moment of silence. It was really beautiful. And speaking with Gunnar, and I got my answer. And I'm really happy about that.
Well, part of it at least.
So it was a good day. It was a very good day.
Now, there's one final thing I must do.
he had a clue that this was actually the way to conquer the North Pole, which it was. In 1926, Amundsen flew over with the airship on Norge. So he was right in his mind. It was 3 decades too early, in fact, in a way.
So when I was talking to Gunnar, he said something that stuck out to me. He believed in a dream. So most articles that I read or people that I talked with all tended to agree that Andrée's scheme to the North Pole was a bit unrealistic. He relied on too many unprepared elements to come together for a chance to be on his side the day of takeoff and really for serendipity to lay her hand to guide their journey. It was wildly ambitious at best, but that's the price you pay when it's something new.
It was very new technology at that time. But
They were taking a huge gamble.
I think they took a gamble.
It's complicated. It's new technology at the outset. It's clearly a white man's expedition. They have no notion of learning from indigenous peoples like the Samis. Like I said, they brought champagne glasses and suits.
After his first unsuccessful attempt in 1896, some believe he carried on because of pride, and others because he faced pressure from his backers. Remember, this is Sweden's first true and only attempt to reach North Pole. That's a pretty big weight to carry.
Go through the newspapers and the media and reputation from 1893, 4, 5, 6. In a way, it's evident that Andrée must do it because he have the sponsors, he have the backup, and he was the first Swede to know how to fly a balloon.
30 years after takeoff, their bodies were found by the ship Brodevåg. The crew were hunting walruses and instead stumbled upon the remains of the expedition during a rare landing on the southern tip of White Island. Now, the island is usually surrounded by packed ice, the same thing that ultimately stopped our own expedition from going any further than 79 degrees in 45 minutes, a little bit shy of my 80-degree dream. And after news broke of their findings, a second expedition, Isbjorn, successfully went out and landed there.
It's like a white dome over it. The glacier, it shines upon the clouds. It makes a white light over that.
Unfortunately, Håkan wasn't able to explore the campsite as he had hoped.
Trying to make a radio transmission from Vito, the first one in history. I went ashore and there were ice bears around. Went back to the boat and suddenly the boat starts to move. Head guy of that trip was very jealous of our photographer because he was a very clever one, very famous. So he had ordered the captain to leave. So in a way, it was an Andrée expedition for me. Got there, but you didn't succeed.
At the campsite, the first thing they discovered was Fraenkel's boat. And they also found their sledges, a medicine chest, tools, sewing materials, clothes, and 42 camera rolls, and even the seagull's eyes they were studying, among dozens of other items. However, the picture was clear from what was discovered and implied in the journal entries. They had food provisions for several months, as well as ammunition, 255 cartridges to be specific. They also had matches, fuel, and cooking utensils. So everything they needed to survive the winter. So what happened? The previous owner of my copy of Andrée's story left me this note saying he believed it was trichinosis, a common theory among many that's been popular until recently. Until Bea, who read the exact same book I did over 15 years ago, began her quest for the truth. When their bodies and relics were taken to Tromso, the biggest discovery was Andrée's diaries. As in the words of the official report, this book for the present, and probably in the future, will be the chief documentary source of what we can learn representing the fate of the expedition. And that's the base for the book that Bea and I read. And since over 100 books were written in Sweden, and they all state the same main theories, however, nobody has ever looked at this expedition from a forensics perspective. That was until Bea. At the age of 35, she started medical school to gain access to the reports and analysis. And unlike the other books that make speculations and claims, she shows possibilities. So what did the forensics show? Strindberg's Long Johns was missing a leg, while his jacket and vest had slashes that cut through them, meaning there's a high probability he was attacked by a polar bear, with Andrée and Fraenkel then making a grave for him. All our books suggest that Andrée and Fraenkel died next to each other in the tent, but Bea was able to show otherwise. At the time of his death, Andrée had on both his boots and mittens, meaning he didn't die inside the tent, actually just outside of it, sitting in an upright position with his rifle next to him. Now, Fraenkel, on the other hand, he was inside the tent without boots or mittens on, indicating he most likely died in a sleeping bag. But one important thing to note, there was a bottle of morphine next to him. Now, if you remember, they used morphine throughout their time on the ice to cure pain. And according to the records, enough was still in the bottle when it was taken out on White Island to be lethal dose for at least one, and possibly two, when you consider a smaller dose can loosen consciousness and lead to hypothermia, based on B's analysis. So was Fraenkel physically sick, or did he choose to end his life? Suicide was seen as unacceptable at the time, and while rare, not uncommon, when one was facing grave circumstances, say wintering on an island in pure darkness for 4 months, with polar bears ready to stalk you. So the probability for Fraenkel, yeah, it's kind of high. And Andrée? B's continued research about the expedition may give us answers in due time, but there are no final words from him in his diaries, nor any other mentions of the other devs, or at least Strindberg's, as we know he died first. He chose to wrap his diaries in a woolen jumper and a balloon cloth. He wanted to make it waterproof if they were ever found. But somehow, he chose to keep his final words to himself. It is my personal belief, if pride kept him on this mission, then pride might also preserve the truth for any of us to ever really know.
Why did they cremate them? That's a big question. They were not analyzed, they were cremated. There are a few pictures of the bodies in this book. Said that was the fear of this being supported by the king, that they had committed. So they said that in order to cover that up, they were cremated.
After the campsite was discovered, a special cooperation was made between Sweden and Norway, since the findings were made by Norwegian ships. They brought the bodies and relics back to Tromso for sorting and labeling. Now, a memorial service was held after Brodevak's return, where all men were honored, but only the remains of Andrée and Strindberg were on site. And during the ceremony, the news actually broke that Fraenkel's body was found on the Andrée Expedition. They waited until all men could be reunited before making their final journey back home to Sweden. On September 19th, all flags around Tromso were at half-mast as their caskets left the church and were taken to the ship. Today, every Scandinavian heart beats as one, as a remembrance of 3 heroic sons of the North. The procession passed many towns along the coast in Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, where stops were made for greetings, where boats, destroyers, and planes would escort at different parts along the 3-week voyage, and when their bodies finally made it back to Stockholm, and they would have arrived right where I was. And they made their final journey to the church for service, escorted by 100,000 people. Now, despite their failed attempt, they still received a hero's welcome. And goodbye.
3 lost heroes, one might say, were brought back home to Sweden by the ship Snowshoes, the same ship that brought them up there in 1897. It was very well arranged and planned. The ship was supposed to come back to Stockholm on the 5th October 1930. 5th October 1897 was the day when they reached the White Island. It was exactly 33 years later. Håkan was welcomed by the king, who held speeches, and the archbishop held speeches. And a crowd of people were following these coffins up to the Storkyrkan in Stockholm, where the funeral was held. And later on, the bodies were cremated and buried under a huge stone block, which is it's a very grand monument.
So I'm walking around the church, which is where they had the ceremony. And they came back 33 years later. And I don't know, I'm getting emotional because I think when they set out to do this mission, I don't think any of them had any idea that it would end up here. I mean, I think they knew the risk, It's always a risk with polar expeditions, but yeah. Yeah. When after millions of years to come, our rolling globe shall perhaps tell to dumb worlds the legend of the passing amid icy cold of our vanished race, will then the story of the end of the last man resemble that which has made your memory glorious? I believe Andrée was a dreamer, and he was a believer. He believed the potential of what a balloon could do, and he believed that he was the one that could prove it. For so much of my life, I have let others tell me what I should do. Whether it's family, it's friends, it's society, it's the media. It might not always be the loud statements by people that are in your orbit. It could be those quiet ones reminding you what's acceptable. Because of this, for a long time, a very long time, I stopped believing that I could build a life that I wanted, a life here in Europe, a place that has always been my first home. Regardless of the fact that I was technically born in the States, I was raised between there and England and Germany, and they are my first home. I stopped believing that I could tell my own stories. Instead, I produced it for everybody else, other brands, over my entire career. MTV, HBO, Nickelodeon, Red Bull, but never my own. I stopped believing in me. I held on to all of the safe things in my life, but those are the exact things that were holding me back. My pursuit in creating these stories is so much bigger than just telling stories, because I love it, because it fulfills me, because it makes me happy. The very first time in my life that I'm truly believing in myself enough to take a chance, believing in myself enough to invest in myself. He's there. Been chasing this story for months, like explicitly, but for years. It's he's just right there. Andrée believed in himself enough to chase his dreams. And over 100 years later, he's finally inspired me to do the same. And that was part of my answer, part of my lesson. And the other part? I made a heart, and it's for Anna. It was a shared love of the arts and families, coming from families in the farming space that brought them together. And about 6 months before his second attempt, they got engaged. Nine years after not returning in 1906, he was declared dead. And 2 years later, she married a Britishman, Gilbert Hawtrey. And for the next 30 years, she lived between the US and the UK. In 1930, when their bodies were discovered and brought back to Sweden, so were all the love letters that he wrote her, and they finally reached her. She died in 1949, and her final wish, her husband, his brothers came here, and they dug up his grave. Unofficially, without anybody's approval. And they placed a silver box next to it. And in that box, it held her heart. See, I've been chasing this story for years, trying to understand my own obsession with the expedition, with Andrée? Why was I so connected to it and to him? It wasn't just about them. It was about her too. Because I know what it feels like to hold a torch for somebody who will never come back. Living with knowing your heart will never really heal. So I made her this heart. And I hope she's with him. Finally. I hope she has peace. The setback to the first attempt in 1896 was a lack of appropriate conditions. And we could say the same thing for me too. After I concepted this show out a few years ago, I let it sit dormant. I just lost love, one of my closest friends to sue, and then my job, all within a year. I lost my way. Now, Andrée was a little quicker to make a second attempt than I, but I eventually got here, and I guess that's all that matters, right? In the expedition, there's a story for everyone. A story of adventure, a story of chasing dreams, a story of going against the odds, a story of believing, a story of love, and a story of loss. All stories I relate to, all stories that are mine. Everything in my life, both good and bad, has brought me here, to this exact moment in time, to finally bring this series to life, to tell this story in particular, a story that's helping me come back to life. It's a story that, my own telling of it, lights up my soul. And that's the rest of my answer. Stringberg's father financed several search expeditions over the years. Right before his own death, he had visions of the White Dome, the same one Håkan saw. In one of his final poems about his son, he says this: "I see him striving forward over inconsolable ice expanses, dragging a sled. I see him curled up in den of ice and stone, in darkness and cold, trying to keep the warmth of life. I see him fighting hunger and hardships. I see him laying, covered by snow, filthy and torn clothes, but with a calm face, as he had fallen asleep, but aware that he had done all in human power to save his young life